Yes, sometimes your first impulse does feel stupid. I have two notes to make on that comment. First of all, yes, your first impulses might feel stupid or not that bright at first, not that clever. But even though they might not seem that clever, they are definitely necessary steps to get you where you need to be. A quick story. I was writing a play, and we put up this play at the Pump House Theatre here in Calgary. It went over quite well. The audience seemed to enjoy it quite a bit. Uh, but I went through three drafts of writing it, and it wasn't until the final draft that we put the play up. But the first draft, I'd say, was really, it was really horrible. It wasn't a good play at all. The first draft was really, really bad, but that's fine because the first draft was necessary to look at and to see how to write the second draft and improve it, and which was necessary to write the final draft, which was the one we ended up using. So the first draft, though it might not have been that great, it was definitely important in the entire creative process. It was a necessary step to get the play to where it needed to be. Okay, so even though the impulses off the top of my head just coming out as I thought of them might not have been that bright or that clever, but they were certainly important, certainly necessary. So instead of wasting my time twiddling my thumbs and not writing anything down on the computer, it was better for me to write down whatever was going on in my head at the time, and then I could take that and build on that and work on that. So you can see why, even though if you're listening to me thinking, well, the first ideas that pop into my head, they're not all that bright, well, that's fine. Don't try and be bright. Don't try and be clever. Try and be bad, because then you have that clay in front of you that you can mold from. And like I said, if you're sculpting, you want to mold from clay. You don't want to mold from nothing. So first impulse may not be that good. Use it anyway. If you're still worried about your first impulse being stupid, I have another story for you too. So I was in one of the improv classes I took at the university. I had an opportunity at one point to get up on stage with the instructor, and we played a game. It's called Word at a Time Story. So what would happen is there's two people on stage, and they each say a word at a time until they've told a story. So it might start off, one day I went to the store, or whatever. And so you just bounce around one word at a time. And so I was playing with the instructor. And so she said a word, then I said a word, then she said a word, then I said a word, then she said a word, then it got to my turn, and I used the word green. And well, anyway, in this game, one of the things is you should try and avoid using words like green. If you come across and you find something, you don't find a green whatever, you find a frog or you find a turtle, because that's going to progress the story on. And now, anyway, I'm getting off track here because I don't want to go too much into improv theory. I could go with improv, I could talk for a long time. I could go way past the first impulse. But for this tip today, it's the first impulse that we're looking at, because this is going to help us in all our creative projects, be it theater or writing or music or whatever, or painting or whatever it is. I just had to throw painting in there because I love visual artists as well. So what was I talking about? Right. So I was on stage with the professor, and word at a time, I got to the word green. Shouldn't be using adjectives, but I thought to myself, well, green was my first impulse. I did good. I did what I was supposed to do. I said green. I went with my first impulse. That's what we've been learning. But I had a epiphany that day, a realization that practice is what it's all about. And that's kind of one of the harsh realities, is practice does make perfect. And so what you can actually do, though, this is a good thing, because you can train your first impulse. Okay, so maybe I wasn't supposed to say green, but green was my first impulse, and that's what I did, and that's what I said. But you know what? Next time, my subconscious might be trained to do it differently. Because if I do green enough, and I learn from that, and I learn, green doesn't work here, or radishes are stupid, or whatever, and I start to learn what it is that I do want, and my subconscious learns what I do want. And the more I practice, the more I do it over and over and over again, you'd be surprised how good your first impulse can become at giving you exactly what you want. So what we're going to look at now is practical ways of how to actually train your first impulse. I have a tendency to really like and enjoy and get caught up in the theoretical side of things. But often what people want to know is, well, what do I do? Like, what can I actually do? So the first impulse, let's treat it like a muscle, okay? And what I mean by that is the idea of an idea coming into your head and you actually using the first idea that you get. That's a muscle, is hearing that first idea and using that first idea and putting it down. That's a muscle that we're going to exercise. So a few ways we can exercise this. I'll give you 3 really simple exercises to do, okay? The first one, I call it, I don't know, pointing at objects, I guess. I use this game with, it's a game I use with actors all the time. And you don't have to be an actor to do this. In fact, this is one of these exercises you can do standing in line for the ATM or driving in your car. You can do this anytime because it's working on the brain. But if you want to do it in a space out loud by yourself, because if other people are around, they might think you're a little bit nuts. But that's okay because we're having fun and we're going to train this first impulse. So what you do is you point at an object, any object, and let your arm go first and just point at an object. Don't think of the object first. And you point at that object, and I'm pointing at my TV. So as soon as I see my TV, you're going to call it something it's not. So I'm going to point at my TV and say banjo, because banjo is the first idea that pops into my head. Or I'm going to point at the picture and say plant. Or I'm going to point at the bag over there and say stew. Or I'm going to point at the lamp and I'm going to call it a tree. Or whatever. And just try to not get caught up in a category. So try not to go cars, tires, windows, steering wheel. Try to get your brain to learn how to think of completely different things. So you point at an object. I point at my TV remote. I see it. I call it a ceiling fan. Right? Whatever the first idea is. And that time I cheated a little bit because my first idea actually was fan. That was my first impulse. So that's what should have come out. Instead, I did allow myself to think a little bit. And I said ceiling fan. But what we're trying to do is just get the first impulse. So just fan, shoe, brush, fish, right? So try and do that. It is a really difficult exercise, so don't beat yourself up because it might be difficult, or some of you might pick up on it and do it really well, and you might just end up doing that all the time. Don't forget to watch out if there's other people around because they might think you're crazy. Anyway, so exercise number 2. This next exercise is fantastic. It's one of my favorite exercises, and there's lots of different names for it. Lots of people have talked about this. I like the term timed writing. So what you're going to need is you're going to need a notebook and you're going to need a pen. Okay? So timed writing. So you might allot yourself 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I like to go with 15 minutes. Now what you can do is you can start off by asking yourself a question like, how do I really feel about that? Or what did I learn today? Or anything like that. Or you can just start off fresh and you don't really know what it's going to turn into. So what you do is you take your pen and you start writing on the page and you don't allow yourself to stop. So even if you have to write something like, I don't know what to write anymore, but this crazy guy on the internet told me that I should keep writing without stopping, so I'm not going to stop my pen. I'm going to keep writing until my 10 minutes is up or whatever I need to write, and write and write and write. And yes, I do think that I learned a lot today, or whatever. Does that make sense? We just keep writing. We do not stop. 15 minutes sounds like a long time, but you'll be really shocked at how quickly the ideas come into your head and how you start to think faster than you can write. And so at first it seems scary, like, oh, no, I'm going to have to pause. I'm going to have to take breaks. No, you won't. You'll just keep writing and writing and writing. There's a very important rule for this game. I like to make this a rule. Once you're finished your writing, no matter how good it is with your timed writing, you're going to take those pieces of paper, you're going to crumple them up, and you're going to throw them away. And you're going to make that promise to yourself before you even start writing. And the reason is because then you know that nobody else is going to see this. So you don't have to worry about it being good or bad. You can actually shut that part of your brain off and say it doesn't matter how it is, because whatever I write with my pen continuously going, no one's ever going to see unless they rifle through the trash. The third exercise is the word at the time story. And you'll need a friend for this, but it's a great way to let your first impulse out. So you stand beside your friend and you guys agree to tell a story. One says one word, then the next says the next word. One says another word, next says the next word. Simple as that. Now it's time to click on the next part, part 3, where I'm going to summarize everything I've said into a nice little package.